Why, hello there. It is 112 days until the Shadow of the Erdtree comes out, and this is the Elden Wait countdown, where I'll be talking about the upcoming DLC every day until it releases to make the wait just a little bit shorter. If you'd like to follow me on this journey to the Shadow of the Erdtree, you can subscribe to the Lore Hunter and make sure notifications are on so you get every video as they release, including part 2 and part 3 as they come out. Today I am continuing my annotated trailer breakdown observation thing I started yesterday. And yes, the breakfast date was good. And if you don't know what I'm referring to, probably means you need to go watch part 1. And if you've watched part 1, you need to watch it until the end. I won't be repeating any of the stuff I have there, so check that out first, but we're going to dive into part 2 right now. Let's get into it. Alright, so we already checked out this part of the image zooming around in part 1, so we're going to let it continue on now. Alright, and of course we're at a new part, so it's time to frame again. So we have this image here of player character in front of what looks to be like the Great Rune symbol for Miquella, possibly based on the gesture, which we'll see later in the trailer. There's a gesture that you can get for pre-ordering the game that is making a similar motion. So that looks like it's the Great Rune symbol for Miquella, and people are thinking that maybe this is a way of Miquella speaking to you, or it could possibly be a grace. This version of like the DLC's graces might look a little different, because as Miyazaki mentioned in an interview, you followed Marika in the main game and her guidance, and in the DLC, you're following in the footsteps of Miquella, as mentioned, and you are sort of following his guidance. And let's see if there's any details we can pick out here. Alright, so we've already seen this stuff in the image. You can see the Shadow of the Erdtree in the background, the cool tower building that we discussed before, big old close-up of the helmet. See the bridge over there, and not that it particularly matters, but you know, this is from here it looks relatively Romanesque in its design, and I think we can continue on from here. I just have to say that I love this armor set, and this character looks awesome. I also really love how severe the sky is in the background. I think that looks really cool. It just goes out, like, look at the details. Like, let's get on in there. Not looking at the background so much as just some of the details. It's been mentioned by a few people, but not sure if maybe this sort of armor kind of is evocative of like Murray, House Murray from the Shaded Castle, which could, I think Quelaag mentioned this, potentially be related to Tanith, because Tanith also kind of wears a mask and a sort of similar design to this, so not sure if that relates. And yeah, this sick sword design just looks cool. And this cloak, to me, looks vaguely kind of like the Ravenmount assassin cloak a little bit, which is an interesting connection if true. Let me see if I can bring that up just to see if it is similar. So yeah, based on this, it's hard to tell. I don't know if it's exactly the same. It may just look a little similar. I think that it looks a little more scraggly, but it is similar though, and at least worth pointing out for now, even if it doesn't bear out, is interesting connection to the Ravenmount assassin, mostly because in the Sage's Cave in the base game of Elden Ring, where you get this set, there is some interesting connections there to the DLC, where that's where you find the Candle Tree shield, and you fight a Black Knife assassin there who's invisible, and that sort of relates into the Baldachin and the obscuring of the Land of Shadow. So just a lot of interesting connections, and this is in here too, which sort of just adds I guess it's at least got me looking around more to see if I can see other things that are sort of connected to that particular cave, because maybe someone, you know, had the DLC on their mind or something while they were designing it. I don't know, but it's interesting to just keep note of.
In that forsaken place.
Also cool armor. See, and I wanted to make note of this column in the background. Let's also take a look at this relief for later. I think we can sort of locate this in the larger world a bit based off of just what's back here with the architecture. But this spirally column is, Quayleg pointed out that this column, the design is I want to say like a Solomonic column, and it's an interesting design that you don't see very often, and you can kind of see this seen also in a more ornate version in the Volcano Manor. Check out Quayleg's video. I'm not gonna just re-explain something that she discovered, but this is the Solomonic column, and as mentioned, this architecture, we'll look at this more in a shot, but we'll see more context of this in the world.
Blood must spill.
So you also have this mask, which, you know, has some relationship towards the Marays, maybe, could be Tanith, could be something completely different. But then you have these, you have the Trina lilies, it's got this purple haze, looks like maybe this character is asleep.
Spill.
Oh, there we go. So, then we got this, which is a really interesting shot and interesting room that I don't think we don't have too much information on, but it's just, there's a lot of possibilities associated with what we see here. For one, and I think it's pretty obvious, is this is very Carrion looking right off the bat. It's not exactly like the fixtures, but you can see, and I'll zoom in just to give extra. So, zooming in here, it very much has that very gothic look of Rhea Lucaria, and you can see the bird cage, just very similar. And it's interesting that these are, looks like these are glintstones, not like fire burning in these candelabras, which is pretty cool. As I said before, more bird cages. The place is in disarray already. I you know, unless our character came through and rolled, it looks like this place is already in disarray. It's an interesting shot because you get the idea that this Carrion ass-looking person, they're sitting here on the sort of throne, but what are they rolling over? You know, it's all ruined. So, I don't. That might be some environmental storytelling about the state of this person's, you know, what they roll over. Those windows in the back, you see this design all the time in Liurnia. It's pretty common there. This is all very gothic, as mentioned.
Blood of your fellows.
All right, and it's just worth pointing out. So, a whole bunch of people had the same initial thought as I did, where this reminded me of the inverted statue that you find at the Carrion Study Hall, and the look of this person, their garb, and can't really tell. I sort of perceive this person as a lady, but some people have said a guy. I don't think it really matters at this point. I don't think determining their gender is going to be hugely specific, unless, you know, this is implying like a Carrion queen or something, which would throw a loop into things, just because Renala was seemingly the first and last of the Carrion queens. So, who this person is very interesting. We don't know much about them right now, but they are very Carrion in nature and looks to be ruling over something. So, be really interested to find if is this like an ancestor of Renala? How does this all work? You know, I guess, you know, Renala was around a long ass time ago, so I'm curious how this person ties in to the Carrion family.
The Erdtree.
And now we got ourselves what looks to be a Deathblight swamp. And I also want to point out this detail. It's sort of easy to miss, but also very unsettling once you see it. There's like these crows. These crows right here, and they got sort of glowing eyes. And they're just looking at the player characters. They come in, I don't think they move at all. And then you can see some telltale death blight going on here. And this architecture is interesting, as others have mentioned. I can sort of get some shaded castle vibes from it. And, not just because of the swamp, but the architecturally, I think it reads kind of similar. Similar, like, sort of roof design and stuff. And very interesting. I assume this is at the base, like the ground level in the Land of Shadow. That up here, wherever else, is where we sort of started, and you can see the little plateaus, but this is like, if you're on the ground, it's this, at least this portion of it is like this nasty swamp place, and I think there'll be a variety of biomes even on the ground level, but yeah, you see this very bog looking flora, fauna. It just looks like a fun place to explore, and probably also pretty annoying if it is Deathblight there, which it certainly looks to be. And then, of course, there's this painting, which has been the source of a lot of speculation. We will see this guy in a very iconic shot in the trailer again later. You keep a close eye on this brooch and sort of this covering, this cape or whatever it is, because that will be the telltale sign of when he appears later. And next to him is this lady who's covering her belly, and when it comes to artwork, like, that's what that signifies. Like, there's not really any question. Like, that's what historically, if a lady has her hand on her stomach, it's because she's pregnant. Like, that's what that means there. As to her identity, not sure. It looks like maybe she has dark hair. I originally saw it as blonde, but I think this is just part of her hood, and you can see some dark hair. I can zoom in. So yeah, you can kind of see it more clearly here. It looks like some dark hair under there, which would rule out America, but it's interesting, and it's something that I've been wrestling with, and I don't have an answer because we just don't have the information yet, is that America, and we see in the room with Mesmer, we see what is sort of clearly America with holding a baby, but then you also have this imagery of this lady who's pregnant, so I just don't know how it all ties together there. Even if it could be the case that could Mesmer be America's son, but not biologically? I doubt it, but I think this hints maybe, because of this connection, that there's a theme here with children that will be happening. And I've been keeping a look at the chairs. I don't think there's any particular ornament that stands out here. It's not the same as like in Morgoth's room. So this chair, could be a throne, but not necessarily anything special or notable. Otherwise, hands. Looks like he got, I don't know if this is just normal decay or like a blood splatter, but either way, whatever's happened to this guy isn't good, and you can sort of see it through some of the either the degradation or the sort of blood splatters on this painting. Which, blood splatter on painting is always indicative of something bad having happened. Oh, it looks like you can maybe see a little bit more black hair here, which is why some people are wondering if this could relate to Fia, being a deathbed companion or something. There's just some interesting potential there that I think it's worth just keeping track of at this point. I don't think there's anything else in this context that we can see at the corners. Alright. So in this next shot we have these jars. It looks like the same that we have for like Alexander and stuff, so maybe they're in the process of being filled. I assume from a gameplay standpoint this is probably a way to navigate vertically, is by hopping on these jars, which sounds pretty cool, actually. There's that, and then we can zoom in to see some of the background details a little bit more. These columns, you have the top, which is interesting because it doesn't look like it does in Maybe this extends further down, but it's not very tall from what I can tell. But the scale, you look at the size of the player, the scale of the column's pretty big. I don't know if this is underground or what exactly, but this asset that I believe we've seen in the lands between before, it puts itself as very kind of, yeah, I'm leaning toward Roman. So this thing has, I'm curious if anyone has any theories, because I don't know what is going on with this. Like, you can see it rotating. Like, there's something in there rotating, and I don't know what its purpose would be. It's a weird one, but it's down here in this lava, which, you know, feels noteworthy. Obviously, that evokes sort of Volcano Manor stuff, but, you know, unlikely to be Volcano Manor, but just with all the snake imagery, too, even if ends up being sort of more Godskin, or it ends up being more Crucible related, there's also a lot of Volcano Manor and, like, Reichard and, like, you know, giant snake sort of potential that I think it's worth at least keeping in the back of your mind as something that could show up. You know, I think it's less likely than other things, especially knowing that Reichard is, in his current form, a sort of newer development as far as the lands between is concerned, but still interesting. So this is a shot I mentioned earlier. We could see the one NPC with sort of the heavy-looking armor on, where I talked about the columns, and you can see the columns here, and you can see this just pretty wild, architecturally speaking, like, entrance, with just the amount of relief on this is just, it looks awesome, but it's not something you'd really see in real life, but it's very cool looking, and, you know, you sort of have these maybe pediments here, I'm not sure, but this is all giving, older to me. And I'd be curious to see what the, I'm trying to remember what that's called. There's a certain, above the head of the door, it's in this archway. It looks like there's another relief there. Curious to see what that is, but I don't think we can make out that level of detail here, but yeah, so you can't really make it out here, but you can see, like, these Solomonic columns, as mentioned, leading up to just, man, it's so ornate. And that it's not the same style of architecture at all, but it has this extravagance that's almost kind of reminiscent of Stormvale a little bit, just in how obviously showy it kind of is. And you see that this goes up here. And these sort of buildings have me really curious. Like, this looks like this could definitely be a legacy. But an interesting thing that Miyazaki mentioned was that they want to have these sort of more transitional spaces between legacy dungeons and the open world, where maybe it's like you're kind of in the legacy or the dungeon, but you're still in open world stuff. Not exactly sure how it'll play out, but I'm curious if you maybe can continue to ride Torrent while you're out here, and it's about getting up to a certain point in which it formally becomes a legacy dungeon or a medium dungeon. This looks like a legacy to me, but maybe not. But just curious, and I like that, the fact that they're not just sitting on their laurels as far as the world design is concerned, and they are interested in improving upon what they did in the base game and giving more of those transitional spaces, having, like, blur the line a little bit, maybe feel a little more naturalistic where it makes sense to be on Torrent, but then you're going into an interior space where it doesn't make sense, and it just sort of follows a logic in that way. So yeah, because this place is big, and it just keeps going up to the point where you have this rubble and stuff that starts to be, like, floating away, going up toward this Baldecan. I don't even know what's happening in the background there. It starts to get really sort of Farum Azula in the back there. Not architecturally, but just with the floating rocks. And again, it almost makes me, maybe this is just debris, but it almost looks like maybe part of the Baldecan is draped on it. I'm not entirely sure, but really evocative design, though. And you can see behind it sort of this lush green space. So I think when you're looking at, like, the main image, this is sort of over toward the left somewhere. So I think that's roughly where it's located. I'm a little interested too because I can't tell if this is just sunlight or maybe this almost looks like some death blight here. Just this sort of oily, sort of coppery tinged. Reminds me of death blight near these columns. I like this grand formal stare. I hope this seems like something cool is going to happen here. And holy moly, I feel like I've got a little further into the trailer, but I think I'm going to call it here for part 2, and we'll continue with this part 3. We may stay on this image for a moment as I'm continuing to look. There's some other stuff I want to peek at. So, yeah, stay tuned for part 3, and then we'll see how many parts this ends up being. But this has been a fun sort of casual dive into things. So, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you also want to follow me on the Elden Wait, subscribe to the Lore Hunter. Don't forget to hit notifications so you get videos as they come out, because they will be coming out daily. And as always, thanks for watching.